Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me back on my second part of my first quilt. If you can remember, the last session we actually made the cushion from these fabric here. And I made a corner cushion, and I made a 17-inch square cushion. So today we're going to move on to making the quilt. So I've started with my 10-inch lined fabric, and then from there I went on to another one, and I've actually cut it into two pieces from corner to corner. All right, and then I've taken another two different color fabric of the same line fabric and then joined them back together. The objective here is to have these particular lines. They're not going to match entirely, but they're going to make a sort of a corner pattern, and so we're calling them corner squares. Okay, so I hope you did went along and made your cushion and you're ready to start this journey with me. So welcome, and let's get right into it. Alright, so we're going to get into it. So you've seen what I've done with the quilt, and now I'm going to show you what I did to actually make this. You're going to need your rotary cutter and your scissors, and I would say get your ruler already. I have already pre-cut some of these 10-inch squares here, pre-cut, and I haven't cut it all down as yet. I'm using a 11-inch square ruler to help me get the measurements correctly. Okay, it's very important that we measure this correctly so that we don't have any wobbly lines on there. So I would say take your time, get this part right, and everything should work out correctly. So what I'm doing here is just measuring 10-inch. I'm going to line up, I'm just going to move this over a little bit. I'm going to line up there, and I'm actually using the ruler, not the board. So the square is not cut down as yet. I'm actually doing that now in front of you. So you need a rotary cutter, nice and sharp, and I'm actually going to turn the board, and now I'm going to use this line here as my marker to ensure I have my 10-inch square correctly, and just trim this off. Slightly move there, and then that again. I would say make sure and put your weight on it just to ensure that it doesn't move, because it can move quite quickly and easily. Okay, that's the last cut. Alright, so I have now 10-inch squares here, and I've cut two together. Now before you start cutting, ensure that you have ironed your fabric so they're nice and smooth, and you can get some accurate cuts. So very important thing to note when you're cutting your fabric with lines, and for this corners quilt is what we're going to do. You need to have horizontal and vertical. Okay, so when you are cutting, you need to cut from corner to corner right, corner to corner left, but you must ensure that they are laid out this way. That's to ensure you get that actual line going in the opposite direction. Let's get my longer ruler out, line it up corner to corner. You can use scissors, but I think with the rotary cutter it's a lot more quickly. You get the job done, and you can stack these up and cut it. So notice that I almost did the same cutting direction, and I changed it very quickly just to make sure I didn't go the wrong way. Now if you do go the wrong way, that simply means that you're going to have to ensure that you cut the other direction with the rest of the fabric, yeah, or next to. So if you know you've done two the same direction, then you need to do another two the other direction to ensure that you can balance it out. So I'm just going to match it down here. Now if I use the same one, I would just literally get those horizontal lines back again. Now I'm going to mix my colors. I have some already pre-cut, so I'm going to go with the red here, And the important bit is to ensure that you get that corner match up. Different colors will work really nicely, and that's what we're actually aiming at. Okay, now once you've done that, you are going to fold it over, front sides together, and you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam to sew along there. And you will do that for all of your squares. Now once you've done that and you have stitched them all up and you have your 1/4 inch, you need to start ironing. So I'm going to seal in my stitch there. And this side, it doesn't really matter which one is the darker fabric. It really is down to you. But I am going to put the blue side down and I'm going to just peel it back slowly. Now remember, it's cut under bias, so you need to run the iron along the middle, and you're going to work your way out just to flatten it all together. Just going to bring it down a little bit. Right, and you're going to do that for all of your squares. Give yourself a little bit of steam. Right, once you've done that, you will then have all of your squares ready. Now I'm going to use my scissors and I'm just going to take off my dog ears there. Now some people don't take them off. I do, because what I find is that once you've actually started to quilt, it can become quite bulky in the corner there. So do that for all of your squares, and I have done sort of pre-ones already, made them up. Use as much different colors as you want with your corners quilt, and I'll just show you how I'm going to lay this out. So I've got a few done on the other side. I am going to start with having the small corners at the top, and I'm going to use sort of a directional using the seam in terms of laying out the fabric. So all of the small squares or small corners are actually going to be at the top to form that particular direction that I want. And this is what I'm talking about. So if you can see, all of the seams run along the same way. I'm just going to add this final one in here. And that's what I'm aiming at. Try not to put these together. So if that happens, you move one out the way so that you don't have the same colors close by. So that's what we're aiming at. So I'm going to do 20 of these in total. You can make it as large or as small as you want. It's entirely down to you. And then we're going to sandwich it together. So you get up to that speed and then we will take it from there. The quilt top is ready and it's ready for the border. Now to work out the amount of fabric you need for the border, you need to measure your quilt top. Now my quilt top measures out at 44 inches length and 36 inches wide. Now you need to total all of that together, so that will give you 160 inches. Okay, now if you were just to measure out fabric, you will make one long strip of fabric measuring 160 inches. Now if you wanted to drill that down a little bit more deeper so you know exactly how much strips you need rather than just cutting one long strip of 160 inches, you will then divide 160 by 40. And why 40? Because 40 is sort of an average measurement that you would have for the width of fabric. So you have 40 and you have 44. So I usually go to 40. So that will give me 4 strips. So it's 160 divided by 40 will give me exactly 4 strips of fabric I need. Okay, now if I wanted to know or to measure out how wide I want my border to be, so in this case I've chosen my black border here to be 3 inches wide. So I'm going to measure, I'm going to multiply the 3 by 4. So the 4 strips multiply by the amount or how wide you want your fabric to be. That will give you 36. So in reality, you would need 1 yard of fabric to do the complete border around the quilt. Now, I have made a 4 inch wide border here to go on the side. And I just wanted to show you how you will do something like this if you've got it in different colors. So I've measured the middle of the quilt top and I folded it and pinpointed to the middle. I've also identified the middle of my border here. So I'm going to lay the middle down together on the quilt as well as on the border. And I'm just going to pin it. Now don't stretch it, because if you stretch it, it will wobble and it wouldn't be neat. And when you go to lay the quilt top down, it's going to be lumpy. All right, so don't stretch the fabric at all. Remember, a lot of this is actually cut on the bias because we've cut the middle of that 10-inch square. So just be careful not to stretch it. So I'm just going to pin it down and I'm going to cut it exactly what I need to stitch the border on. So again, no stretching. So take your time and do that. Now, stitching the quilt top together did not take very long at all. It was quite fast. In fact, you can actually make this quilt in a day. So it's not very big. It's literally going to be a lap size. And as I said, you can make this in a day, providing you've got the time to do so. It is a fun project and it's a corners quilt. So we're making sure that all that striped fabric meet in the corners, and you can actually see the wavering lines here from point to point as we follow along. So now I'm going to do is to fold this border back to the edge of the border there. Just give it a finger press, and then using my scissors, I'm just going to hold the scissors really taut against it and cut. And that way I know it is accurate. And I'm going to do the other side also. And then I'm going to stitch it on. Now once it's stitched on, the next thing to do is to work out the backing. Now because this is a very small quilt and it's as I said, most fabrics are 44 inches in width, really all you need to do is stitch it down the middle, 2 pieces of 44 inch depending on how long your fabric is. You stitch it together and then you would have the width, length, everything about your fabric that you wanted to add on the back for. So the back is your backing. So remember to sandwich your quilt together, you'll have your quilt top, you will have the back fabric, and you will have your poly down or your premium batting in the middle. I usually use polyester and cotton batting. All right, and I use a brand poly down. No affiliation to them, no credit to them, just that it really works really well for me. Okay, so that's it. So once that's completed, the next step is to quilt it, and then we will take it from there. All right, I've gone ahead and basted the quilt. Let me just show you exactly what I've actually done. So to baste the quilt and put it together as a sandwich, you need to have your backing fabric down. What I've gone ahead and done is really stretch it out and use masking tape all the way around the size of the actual backing fabric. Okay, I've then added my batting to it, same size as the backing fabric, and I've put my quilt top on top of it and smoothen it out. Now I usually use the glue, so what I tend to do is do it in portions. So I would spray very lightly on the backing fabric and then let that dry for a couple of seconds, and then I will bring it over very gently and smoothen it out up to the area which I sprayed, so it lays really flat. And I will continue to do that for the entire length of the quilt top. Once I've done that, the next stage is to actually do the free motion quilting, and that will be the end of it, and then we will trim this down and put the binding on. The quilt is now ready. All of the quilting has taken place. And so the next step is to remove the excess batting and the excess backing. So it's batting and backing of the quilt, because obviously we don't need this anymore. And so you would need your long ruler and your rotary cutter and just tidy up the edges. And that's what I'm going to do now. When you actually do this, ensure that your ruler is nice and firm as you go. And all I'm going to do is keep moving the quilt down until I do that all the way around to ensure that it's nice and straight. So I'm going to line it up from my previous cut and keep going straight towards the end. And you can see I need to replace my blade here. Right, we'll keep going all the way down. So it's going to keep pulling it down and adjusting this until it is ready. And it actually tidies up the quilt at the end. Makes it a lot more tidy and easier to put the binding on. So that's what I'm going to do. And then the next time we will put the binding all together. Okay, so I've removed all of the backing fabric and the batting in the middle. All right, so it's time now to prepare for the last step in actually making the quilt before we can actually start enjoying it. So I've measured out 4 strips of 2.5 inch binding, and what I've done is started to sew it on probably about 8 to 10 inches away from the top of the actual quilt. So I've started leaving a little bit of a flap here because that's important to remember once I come round to rejoin it so it lays really nice and flat. I've come to the end, nearing the end of the first strip, and so keep going until you get to about 1/4 inch and stop with the needle down. Turn the quilt and make sure everything is lined up nice and straight. Now what we need to get is just sort of 90-degree shape here. So you close it up together and line it up to the top of the previous area where you just sewn. Make sure it's nice and straight. I'm just using my pin just to flatten it down and put it back down. And continue to go all the way down again so that you can get round the corner. So take it off so you can have a look at what I'm talking about. So you can get round the corner nice and easy. So once you go and you turn it round, because what we're going to do is to do obviously the machine binding, and we're going to sew in the ditch to continue. So once you go back, once you've done all your first round, you're going to re-stitch the under bit right on top there, but you're going to make sure you fold this nicely over so you get that mitered corner in the corner there. So I'm just going to continue, and I'm going to continue to go all the way around until I've actually finished. Alright, so I've come towards the end of this particular piece of binding here, and so I need to join it. So the best thing to do is to put it together. Don't pull it, but just put it together very gently, and I need to cut just slightly above it, yeah, slightly above this one, so that I have area to bind it together. So I'm just going to cut at 1/2 inch beyond the previous one. All right, so what I'm going to do now is measure it, And I'm just going to use my marker of where I want to actually fold it. I hope you can see that there. So I've used my chalk, tailor's chalk, and just to mark it there. So all I'm going to do is put it together like so. So I'm going to have to bend the actual quilt to do that. Put it together, edge to edge. Let me just remove this one. So just do that again to make sure you understand what I'm actually saying. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to put them together, line it up. It's going to be a little bit fiddly, but because obviously it's not the norm in terms of how the fabric will bend. All right, so we just need to handle it a little bit. Once you've got it lined up, hold it, and probably you can give yourself a little bit more excess space. Sew those edges together, and what happens now is that you have that actual length there. I'm going to go back in, start back where I stopped, and just continue back stitch there to make that sealed in, and just continue all the way down and rejoin where I started. That's it. And that's the front binding on. Now to get started on the other, I'm just going to fold it over. Remember, just move those excess threads there. And I'm just going to fold it over, and I want to make sure that I'm actually covering the blue thread, and I use blue just to make sure you can actually see it. Alright, go right over, and I'm going to sew in that particular ditch there where I started sewing on the top so it doesn't come through. So I'm going to line it up right in the ditch, and I'm going to check every time I do this. So I'm going to make sure I stay in the ditch and check that I'm actually staying on that particular previous sewn line, so I don't ruin it, because unpicking is no joy. So stay in the ditch. Right, that looks lovely. Right, so I'm just going to show this to you before I go all the way around and nip it off. So there it is. So if covered nicely, it is not on the actual backing fabric, and it's still on the blue line, so all the thread color blends in nicely. So I'm just going to continue this, and then yeah, I will show you my completed quilt. Okay, so I've finally finished the quilt. It is actually a lap size, and it doesn't take too long at all. It's stitched together quite quickly. I had lots of fun making it. If you look closely at it, you can actually see all of the quilting patterns on the quilt. As I said, it's stitched together really, really quickly, and you can actually get this done in a day. Now, if you want to look, I've used a solid yellow at the back, and the quilting pattern comes out really nicely on it. I enjoyed making the quilt so much that I went ahead and made a larger one, and this one measures out at 63 by 75. Again, this one stitched together very quickly, and it did not take any time at all. I've added 3 borders onto this one, so a wide border here just to capture and frame all of the corners in the quilt. I've then used a 5-inch border at the top, and I did half-inch triangles with some purple and some yellow, and then I finished with the yellow at the top, and of course I used binding for this one, and at the back I used blue. Okay, so if you enjoyed my experience with this quilt, please start quilting with me, and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please share. It's a really great way to help support the channel and to give me confidence. I will also look forward to all of you sharing your patterns with me, and I'll see you next week Sunday. Bye.